I think fragility in itself is not a bad thing. Everything in the world works in cycles, things change, there's like a concept of death in nature. And I think we live now in a world that it's not supposed to work that seamlessly.
Thinking about the strong resilience of ecosystems, I felt like the fragility actually lies more in our perception towards these very unpredictable entities that are very complex to understand and hold certain mystery.
Quite likely all ecosystems are designed into something that becomes very fragile when we think of them as a pure thing in themselves. So when we think, for example, of monoculture, what makes it fragile is the fact that it exists as a singular thing. I think we can take a little bit of that into society as well. We need to embrace the fragility of the monoculture by allowing it to be contaminated. We need to let the sounds contaminate. We need to let the waters flow.
I think there's always just a fragility in community or coming together. There's something about opening up to others and allowing others into your vicinity and then creating a communal feeling, I guess. I wrote a text in 2022 which was called The Creation of the Sea. And in this text I talked about a dissonant choir. I was very interested in hearing different voices and different opinions and having them kind of like mingle together into a white noise or like a dissonance.
This piece that is presented here in Fiber Festival is made by many different people together with me through a series of workshops that have been organized with Fiber Reassemble Lab. It's a garden that generates electricity from the metabolism of bacteria that's living in the mud in the installation. I also call it fermenting electricity, what's happening in the work.
So I think in my work I usually try to make the parallel between what's made of water and what's made of sound. And I think we can think of these both as quite slippery things, which makes them quite fragile. You know, they're very hard to catch, and at the same time, if whatever lives exclusively in your imagination, like water that you cannot see, like a sound that you remember, that is quite fragile. But in my work and in lots of other people's work and in history, we see those forces moving things. They're shifting entire cultures, where the water is and where the sound is.
I use the sea as a metaphor to actually talk about how we can liquefy a label. If you see the sea as like an endless plain that changes constantly and you cannot really make a topography of it, you can imagine kind of something endless and something that becomes. And I imagined us, or like people, as like water molecules, like rolling bodies that like roll over each other in this friction, in this endless sea, and that constantly change position and place.
I learned that the more you build physical and emotional and certain knowledge-generating experiences, I learned to really appreciate working with this living artwork.
I think of this infrastructure that we depend on and how fragile it actually is, how it seems to be invisible and works seamlessly, and we just don't even understand how it works. But once it breaks, we see what we depend on. It doesn't have to be like this. There should be space for like the break and the fragility and breakdown. Thinking more about the maintenance and repair instead of just like efficiency and everything working perfectly. So I think bringing the fragility in would be quite a healthy thing.